Welcome, dreamers, to the realm where time whispers its forgotten names, and the sea holds truths long buried in silence. Tonight, beneath a blanket of stars and the hush of midnight tides, we drift toward a world not found on any modern map. A realm suspended between philosophy and legend, between Plato's pen and Poseidon's realm, the lost city of Atlantis. Before we embark on this journey through time's mysteries, if these ancient whispers resonate with your soul, let your presence be known through a gentle eye, and join our circle of dreamers by subscribing to continue these nightly journeys into history's hidden realms. Share with us, fellow dreamers, from which corner of the world you're joining tonight's contemplation. Let the global community of history's mysteries connect across time zones as we drift together into the past. Close your eyes, soften your breath, and let us now descend into the waters of memory to seek the hidden truth beneath Plato's ancient tale. The dream of Atlantis awaits. Let us begin, not with the roar of waves crashing upon the shore, but with a whisper gentle, almost imperceptible, breath beneath the sea. This is where our journey begins, not on the surface, but far below, where silence carries memory and the ocean cradles stories older than language itself. It begins in twilight, as your eyes grow heavy and the world softens into velvet shadows. In this space between waking and sleep, the veil of time thins. You stand upon the shores of your imagination, where the sea glows with ancient light and the stars above mirror forgotten constellations maps, once drawn by hands that have long since turned to dust. The name is Atlantis. It is more than a place. It is a dream, a legend, a longing etched into the human soul, a whisper of a golden city that once rose from the sea, only to vanish in a single night of fire and flood. Atlantis, the city of harmony and pride, of temples and towers, of wisdom and ruin. But before we trace its fall, we must understand the source of the whisper, the man who first gave it voice. In the 4th century before the Common Era, a philosopher sat beneath the olive trees of Athens. His name was Plato. He was not just a thinker, but a dreamer of forms and truths. He listened not only to logic, but to silence. And from that silence emerged a story, a memory passed down through generations, a tale told by Solon, the wise lawgiver, who heard it from the priests of ancient Egypt. Plato wrote it down, not as a Mythical but as history. Into dialogues Timaeus and Critias recorded the account, the story of a powerful island civilization, larger than Libya and Asia combined, a people descended from the gods, a city of concentric rings, gleaming with orichalcum and humming with sacred energy, a place of philosophy and peace, until pride undid it all. And then, as if swallowed by the very ocean it once ruled, it vanished. Was it real, a memory encoded in stone and myth? Or was it an allegory, Plato's warning to Athens about the dangers of hubris and imperial might? We drift now toward that question, not to solve it, but to contemplate it, to let the currents of thought carry us through time. Imagine now the Mediterranean as it was millennia ago, vast and unknowable, dotted with ships of cedar and bronze, sails billowing like wings of seabirds, trade routes weaving between islands like threads in a divine loom. To the west, beyond the Pillars of Heracles, and beyond that, said Plato, was Atlantis. The island flourished for generations. Its people lived in harmony with nature, guided by laws handed down by Poseidon himself. Their buildings shone with polished metals. Their fields were lush with strange fruits. Their canals shimmered with flowing water, and their temples echoed with the chants of philosophers and priests. But as centuries passed, they forgot the source of their wisdom. The divine faded from their hearts. They turned their gaze outward, toward conquest, toward domination, and so the gods withdrew their favor. In a single night and a day, said Plato, the earth groaned, the sea rose, and Atlantis disappeared. Is this a tale of moral decay, or is it the echo of a real event, a memory of catastrophe encoded in myth? The earth remembers in layers. Beneath the oceans lie continents of forgotten, beneath the warm hush of the Athenian sun, where marble temples whisper to the skies, and olive leaves trembled in the breath of distant gods. A man once listened to stories not his own. He was not a sailor, nor a mystic, but a philosopher, a soul attuned to thought's gentlest ripples. His name was Plato. Yet even he, the student of Socrates and the teacher of Aristotle, leaned upon something older, a tale not born in Greece, but carried from across the sands, from Egypt, where temples whispered secrets to those who could read the breath of stone. Plato tells us he received the story of Atlantis from his ancestor Solon, the lawgiver, a man of deep wisdom and poetic soul, who traveled to Egypt in search of truth not found within the agora or senate. He journeyed to the sacred city of Sais, where priests of Neith, goddess of creation and wisdom, tended scrolls far older than any Greek lineage could recall. It was there, in the hush of a temple where the air smelled of papyrus and frankincense, that Solon was told of a forgotten war, a conflict between ancient Athens and a mighty island beyond the Pillars of Heracles, a war that ended with the sea reclaiming Atlantis. The priests spoke not in metaphor, but with reverence, as if recounting history rather than myth. They unrolled scrolls, inscribed with timelines beyond the reckoning of Solon's homeland, and they gently chided him, reminding the Greek of how young his civilization truly was, how often the world had been cleansed by water and fire, and how memory, like a tide, receded and returned, always incomplete. The story they shared was one of grandeur, a civilization rich in spirit and design, with a capital city laid out in concentric rings. At its heart stood a temple to Poseidon, surrounded by sacred groves, canals, and bridges. The Atlanteans, they said, were the children of gods and mortals, raised in abundance, harmony, and divine instruction. But as Solon listened, perhaps he felt the trembling edge of melancholy that always follows tales of greatness. For the priests also spoke of decline, of the Atlanteans' growing pride, of their hunger for dominion, and of the gods' displeasure. Solon returned to Greece, carrying this tale within him like a glowing ember. Never fully able to commit it to verse, he planned a great poem, he said, but age overtook him, and so it fell to his descendant Plato to shape the tale. In the dialogues Timaeus and Critias, Plato claims to retell what Solon heard. But here something mystical occurs. The lines between reporting and dreaming blur. For Plato was not only a philosopher, he was a weaver of allegory. Was Atlantis his parable, a mirror held to Athens in the time of its imperial pride? Or was it a faithful echo of Solon's journey, itself a reflection of Egypt's memory? These questions do not disturb the stillness we seek tonight. Rather, they deepen it. For even in uncertainty, the story breathes. The scrolls of Sais may no longer be seen, yet their echo lingers, not in the dust of museums, but in the mind's quiet hours. Imagine now Solon in the temple, the oil lamps flickering, hieroglyphs glowing gold upon sandstone walls. He listens, eyes closed, two voices that carry the weight of millennia. Somewhere beneath that moment, buried in the hush between breaths, the whisper of Atlantis stirs. Perhaps it was not just a tale of a sunken land, but a ritual of remembrance, like torchlight passed in darkness. And what of the priests, guardians of stories that outlived kings and floods? Were they breathed deeply now, dear Travala, in thought? For we arrive at the gates of Atlantis not as it fell, but as it lived. Before pride swelled and the sea claimed its walls, there was beauty, vast and harmonious. And it was here, in the city of rings, that sacred order met shimmering splendor. Imagine the city not from above, as if viewed by a god, but from within as a wandering soul walking gently along wide, circular avenues paved with smooth stone. Plato wrote that Atlantis was built in concentric rings, 3 of water, and 2 of land, each perfectly spaced, each connected by bridges and channels carved by thoughtful hands. At the very center of these rings rose the Acropolis, the navel of the island, the pulse of its spirit. This sacred center was home to the temple of Poseidon, god of the sea and founder of Atlantis, who, as the legend tells, carved the island from chaos and gifted it to his mortal beloved Cleta. In honor of her, he built the first dwelling atop a hill encircled by rings he drew with his divine hands, like ripples spreading out from a moment of love. As you close your eyes, you may see gleaming towers rising like ivory reeds, domes catching the sun's golden warmth, statues of gods and beasts shaped from metal that gleamed like firelight. The Atlanteans spoke of a substance called orichalcoma, luminous alloy second only to gold. Its red gold glow shimmered in the walls of temples, in the veins of fountains, in the delicate carvings upon lintels and spires. A city adorned in metals that caught the light not just of the sun but of the soul. There was a deep logic here. The city was not laid out in haste, nor in the chaos of ungoverned growth. It followed geometry, the sacred kind. Not just circles and lines, but meaning. The Atlanteans, it is said, built with purpose. Each ring served a role. The innermost, sacred. The next, civic. The outer, communal and agricultural. Water flowed through the channels like blood through arteries, nourishing fields, washing streets, feeding fountains. At night, the city glowed. Lamps fueled by translucent oils flickered and rose along the canals, casting reflections that danced across the water's surface like spirits at play. Music drifted on the breeze, soft lyres, the murmur of flutes, the distant echo of voices lifted in praise or contemplation. Even the animals here seemed touched by gentleness. Sacred bulls roamed in wide enclosures, tended not with iron and whip, but with reverence. Gardens bloomed with fragrant herbs and flowering trees, some said to come from beyond the known world, orchids kissed by stars. Vines that wound like spiral galaxies toward the heavens. The people of Atlantis walked slowly, for they had no reason to hurry. Time was a friend, not a master. And though their achievements were, let us drift now from the structured beauty of Atlantis and into the depths of memory that ripple across civilization's echoes of a single, overwhelming truth whispered through time. The world has drowned before. Breathe slowly as though your lungs remember water. For now we are entering not a city, but a pattern, a myth too wide to belong to just one people, too old to wear a single name. And yet, it is the shadow of Atlantis, mirrored across time, refracted like moonlight in a well. Plato was not the only one who spoke of a world lost beneath the waves. Long before his dialogues were etched into scrolls, the ancients had told of waters that came without mercy. They told of storms that washed away empires, of mountains swallowed, of stars weeping as the earth forgot its children. From Mesopotamia came the tale of Utnapishtim, the immortal man who survived the wrath of the gods by building an ark. His story, inscribed on clay tablets in the Epic of Gilgamesh, tells of rains that fell for 6 days and 6 nights, of a boat that floated upon endless waters, of a dove sent out, then a raven, of a new beginning born from ruin. Sound familiar, dreamer? It echoes in Genesis 2, in the tale of Noah, whose ark bore pairs of life through divine judgment. In that sacred text, the flood is not just water, it is a forgetting and a remembering. The Hindus spoke of Manu, warned by a fish Matsya, an avatar of Vishnu, that a deluge was coming. Manu built a boat, tied it to the horn of the fish, and survived. Afterward, he began anew, bearing the seeds of life into a cleansed world. In the Americas, among the Maya and Aztec, there were stories of previous worlds destroyed by water. In ancient China, the Great Flood was battled by Yu, the Great, who channeled the waters into rivers and brought order to chaos. These are not isolated imaginings. They are a shared song, sung in different tongues, a rhythm of memory that pulses through the human soul. The earth trembles, the skies open, the waters rise. Why? Some say it is because floods truly came. Sea levels once surged, comets fell, ice ages ended, rivers swelled, lands disappeared, and those who watched, who survived, told stories. Others say these are spiritual truths, that the flood is within, that it washes away arrogance, renews balance, and reminds us of our place in the great harmony. In this gentle, contemplative tide of thought, Atlantis becomes not just a city but a symbol of what happens when harmony fades. It joins the song of lost worlds, the hymn of humanity humbled. But there is something else, something quieter still, a detail often overlooked. Plato places Atlantis 9,000 years before his own time. That is, over 11,000 years before. Now we journey to the edge not of the world itself, but of what the ancient world believed to be its limit. Let the waters grow calm, like a great breath paused at the tip of the tongue. For here, beyond the lands of myth and marble, stand to silent watchers, the Pillars of Heracles. They arise from stone and legend alike, guarding the passage between the known and the unknown. To the Greeks, they marked the boundary of their world, the threshold where the Mediterranean Sea kissed the mouth of the Atlantic, and where all maps faded into speculation. Today, we call them the Strait of Gibraltar. But to Plato and those who came before, they were more than geography. They were liminal beings, anchors at the edge of mystery. And it was beyond these pillars, he wrote, that Atlantis lay. Pause for a moment, dreamer, and gaze out across that ancient waterway. Imagine standing on the cliffs of Iberia or the shores of Morocco, the sea wind cooling your cheeks, the scent of salt and myrtle in the air. Look westward, not with eyes of modern maps, but with the heart of a seeker. Out there, beyond the reach of merchant ships and Homeric verse, stretched the great ocean. And somewhere within that misty vastness, Plato claimed, was a land once rich, now lost. A continent, perhaps, or an island vast as empires, a place of temples, towers, and trembling fate. The Pillars of Heracles were named for the hero who bore the heavens upon his back. According to myth, Heracles split the land in two during one of his labors, creating a gateway between seas. They are both a beginning and an end, a portal between the seen and unseen. To speak of Atlantis, then, is to step through that portal, to leave the comfort of known history and sail into the waters of memory and mystery. But what lies beyond? Plato tells us the Atlanteans came from that distant land beyond the Pillars, spreading their influence across Libya, across Europe, even pressing upon ancient Athens. But his story, though precise in some places, remains cloaked in fog. He gives measurements, yes, descriptions of distance and size, but as in all dreams, the borders blur. Many have tried to pinpoint the place. Some have looked to the Azores, a scatter of islands adrift in the Atlantic mist. Others have looked to the submerged lands off Spain's southern coast, where sonar reveals structures buried beneath. Let us now sink deeper into the ancient tide, beyond the sea walls and sacred bridges, past the misty gate of the Pillars, and into the heart of divine memory. For at the center of Atlantis is myth woven into every street, every law, every grain of its silver-veined stone stands a family born of gods and earth, the sons of Poseidon. Close your eyes and feel the shift. The world grows quieter here, not because there is nothing left to say, but because we are nearing the origin of all that followed. According to Plato, when Poseidon claimed the island, it was not uninhabited. Upon the central hill, cloaked in trees and heavy with dew, lived a mortal woman named Cleopatra. She was young, beautiful, and unmarked by the corruption of cities. Poseidon, god of the sea, fell in love with her not with hunger, but with reverence. To protect her, he encircled the hill with rings of earth and water, sculpting the land into sacred geometry. And there, in that hidden grove, Plato bore him 10 sons twins 5 times over. These children were not entirely divine, nor entirely mortal. There was something in between, beings shaped by both oceanic depth and human breath. The eldest of the firstborn twins was named Atlas, and to him, Poseidon gave the island entire. Atlas became king. His name is echoed even now in oceans, in maps, in constellations. The Atlantic Ocean bears his legacy, and in its vastness, the legend floats still. But it was not just Atlas who ruled. His 9 brothers were given domains as well, each granted a portion of the island, each bound by blood and custom. They ruled as a council beneath Atlas's kingship, a perfect balance, it is said, of divine authority and fraternal harmony. Their code was sacred, passed down from their father and preserved in copper and stone. They swore oaths upon bull ceremonies solemn and symbolic, performed in the central temple where the breath of Poseidon stirred the incense. Once each cycle of the moon, the 10 kings would gather. They wore robes woven with sea thread and gold, and upon their heads, circlets of orichalcum that shimmered like burning twilight. They would take the blood of a sacred bull and let it fall upon the altar, not as sacrifice, but as remembrance, a binding of lineage to law, of power to humility. They would dine together afterward, beneath murals of starfish and dolphins, surrounded by, in the hush of Atlantis, where breath meets silence and stone meets starlight, the temples rose like dreams carved into matter. They were not merely places of worship but vessels of resonance, designed to awaken what slumbered within the soul. Temples of sound and light, born from the language of the cosmos. Let your mind wander through their halls, dreamer. You enter not through doors, but through thresholds of air and incense, where the scent of cedar mingles with the distant murmur of moving water. Each step echoes not as noise, but as rhythm, as if the floor beneath your feet remembers your arrival before you do. The Atlanteans understood harmony not only in governance, but in architecture. Their temples were built with precision that mirrored the stars, their walls aligned with their domes open to constellations. Their pillars were tuned to frequencies that resonated with breath and blood. It is said that sound was not just heard, hear it was felt. The stones themselves were shaped to carry tones that healed, that calmed, that connected. They did not shout their prayers. They hummed them, low, sustained vibrations, sung in spirals through vast chambers, where the air itself became sacred. Some walls were etched with symbols, not letters, but harmonics, visual representations of tones, carved in curves that looped like water through a reed. These weren't decorations, but instructions. The entire building was an instrument, and light, or the light. Sunlight was guided through crystal lenses embedded in the ceilings, casting pools of iridescent color that drifted slowly across the floor like petals on a pond. At sunrise and twilight, these pools danced across statues, igniting their eyes, their palms, their hearts. It was not illusion, but intention. The temples taught without speech. Acolytes would sit in stillness, their robes whispering against marble, their eyes closed, their hands resting upon veins of glowing mineral that hummed with faint warmth. They were taught not by scrolls, but by presence. The wisdom of Atlantis was felt, not told. In these temples, the priests and philosophers spoke little. They listened to the wind in the lattice, to the movement of light across sacred geometry, to the way water, when poured through channels carved in orichalcum, would sing in harmonic intervals, as if the island itself were attuning the soul of its people. Each temple had its own resonance. One may hum with the deep sound of the earth grounding, stabilizing. Another might sing with high delicate tones that lifted thought beyond the body, toward the celestial. There was one temple, it is said, that sang only at night, when the moon reached a precise point in the sky, and the ocean's tide matched the tone of the inner sanctum. A single note would bloom through the structure like a flower of sound. Now we turn from temples to power, from stillness to motion. Let the dream shift, dreamer, like the changing tide. For Atlantis was not only a sanctuary of light and harmony, but an empire. Vast, proud, and radiant in its strength. An empire of 10,000 chariots. Breathe slowly, for the Atlanteans did not always remain within their sacred rings. In the centuries after Poseidon's sons divided the land and the temples flourished with knowledge, Atlantis grew outward. It stretched its arms beyond its shores, reaching toward the mainland. Its fleets were not just traders, but emissaries of expansion. Its riders were not merely messengers, but symbols of imperial might. Plato tells us that Atlantis held dominion over many lands. Parts of Europe and North Africa lay beneath its influence. Its armies were vast, so vast that the number of chariots alone could not be counted in mere hundreds. And more, but pause here, do not rush into visions of conquest. Let us look first at the stillness that came before the storm. At its height, Atlantis was not yet driven by greed. Its fleets sailed with banners of turquoise and deep red, gliding across waters like floating temples. The ships were curved, their sails silken and dyed with seaborne pigments. Bronze-tipped oars dipped rhythmically, guided by songs passed down from the early Maranus melodies that held the memory of the stars. The cities on the mainland, those ancient places before Greece and Carthage, welcomed the Atlanteans with them. They brought not only goods, but architecture, language, and tools crafted from metals not yet mined in those distant lands. Their influence spread as gently as mist, then as steadily as rain. But over time, as their reach expanded, something within began to change. The Atlanteans started to measure not in songs, but in silver. They tallied their victories. They counted the heads of cattle, the weight of tribute, the number of soldiers under each banner. Their pride, once anchored in wisdom, began to shift toward display. 10,000 chariots, each gleaming like a storm caught in sunlight. They bore shields inlaid with gold, spears tipped with obsidian or iron. The horses swift and enormous were bred in. The earth is quiet. Until it isn't, it holds its breath beneath our feet, bearing the weight of cities, the rhythm of footsteps, the soft hum of civilizations that bloom like flowers and then fade. But the earth remembers everything, and in time it speaks. Tonight, dreamer, we listen not to temples or kings, but to stone, to soil, to fault lines hidden like veins in the skin of the world. We listen to the memory of the earth beneath Atlantis. Close your eyes. Feel the slow breath of the land. There are stories that come not from scrolls or myths, but from the silent witness of the earth itself. Plato tells us that in a single day and night of misfortune, the land of Atlantis was swallowed by the sea. An earthquake, a flood, a moment of cataclysm that turned towers to foam and temples to silence. But to understand that fall, we must look deeper. The Mediterranean region lies upon the meeting place of tectonic plates, where the African and Eurasian plates pressed against each other with immense, invisible force. Over centuries, this pressure builds, and when it releases, the result is violent. Volcanoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, these are the breath and roar of the earth. Consider Santorini, once known as Thera, around 1600 BC. A volcanic eruption tore through the island with the fury of gods. The sky turned black. The sea rushed in. The island's center collapsed into and the Minoan civilization, just to the south on Crete, trembled in its shadow. This eruption, one of the most powerful in recorded history, left behind ash, as deep as mountains, waves, as high as cities. Some say it was this event, this collapse of Thera, that birthed the memory of Atlantis. Others speak of Doggerland, a once inhabited land between Britain and Europe, drowned by the rising sea. Of the land bridges now lost beneath the Aegean. Of Helica, city on the coast of Greece, which in 373 BCE sank beneath the waves after a sudden quake just before Plato died. The world is filled with places swallowed by time. Could Atlantis be among them? Or perhaps not a single place, but 1,000, the memory of many cities drowned, woven into one golden myth. The earth does not speak in words. It rumbles, it sighs, it waits. But sometimes it cries out. And on that night when Atlantis fell, it is said the ground split. The rings of the city shuddered like ripples turned violent. The great temple of Poseidon cracked from dome to foundation. The sacred bulls screamed. The past is not flat. It does not lie in lines like ink across a page, nor stack itself like books upon a shelf. It spirals. It echoes and repeats in patterns so intricate that only dreams can understand them. Tonight, dreamer, we drift into the sacred geometry of memory. Imagine a spiral shell glistening with salt and time, half buried in the sands where Atlantis once stood. Its curve is precise, perfect, crafted not by accident, but by natural law. The same law that governed the stars, the tides, the rings of the vanished city. Atlantis was not just a legend, it was a shape. Plato describes the city as concentric circles of land and sea, 3 of water, 2 of earth, a perfect mandala etched upon the surface of the world. From its center rose the Acropolis. From that center, all else flowed. This is more than architecture. It is memory encoded in space. Why do we return to it again and again? Why does the story persist when so many others have been washed away? Because it fits. It fits into the hidden symmetry that our souls instinctively recognize, like the rhythm of a heartbeat, the arc of a wave, the orbit of a planet. The geometry of Atlantis stirs something within us. It speaks to the deep longing for a world in balance, where design reflects harmony, and form follows meaning. Many cultures across time and oceans have echoed this design. In India, the mandala; in the Celtic world, in Egypt, the scarab's wings. Each a sacred shape, meant not to decorate, but to guide, to remind us that reality, like memory, is not linear. It turns inward and outward, again and again, folding like breath. Atlantis in this sense is not a place lost but a pattern remembered. It is an idea, etched not in stone, but in mind, a resonance that reappears when we close our eyes and let silence speak. Some modern seekers have tried to reconstruct Atlantis not just as a city, but as a model for living. They study its geometry and attempt to replicate it in gardens, in temples, in communities. They believe that by restoring the shape, they might restore the spirit. And perhaps, in some way, they are right. For memory is not just a thing we hold, it is a shape we inhabit. And when we walk in circles, we do not walk in confusion but in meditation. Some islands are fixed anchored to the crust of the earth like sleeping beasts, but Atlantis was never still. Tonight, dreamer, we follow the drift not just of continents and currents, but of story. For Atlantis is not only a land lost beneath the sea, it is an island that moves. Close your eyes now and feel the ocean below you shift not violently, but with the slow certainty of time. Beneath the waves, the earth flows, plates slide, mountains rise and fall, and stories follow. Ever since Plato placed Atlantis beyond the Pillars of Heracles, seekers have searched for the island. But it slips through their grasp, each time wearing a new face. Not because it hides, but because it moves with the current of memory. Some say Atlantis was in the Atlantic Ocean, near the Azores, where underwater ridges hint at once dry land. Others point to the Canary Islands, their volcanic peaks rising from the depths like the broken teeth of some ancient giant. Still others claim Atlantis was not in the Atlantic at all, but in the Mediterranean. That it was Thera, Santorini, or even swallowed in the marshes of southern Spain. But Atlantis is not a pin on a map. It is a mirror. Wherever the land rises and falls with sudden via air, we hear Atlantis. Wherever a civilization vanishes, leaving behind stone and silence there, we glimpse it. Wherever myth and memory blend, and the past refuses to be still there, the island floats. Some theories speak of shifting crusts, of lands, once dry, now drowned. The theory of Earth crust displacement suggests that entire continents may move not slowly, over millions of years, but suddenly, cataclysmically. If such a shift occurred, it could indeed drag an island beneath the sea. But even more than tectonics, it is the tectonics of story that carry Atlantis from place to place. Every culture with a coast has its own Atlantis. In Celtic lore, there is Hybrasilla Phantom Island west of Ireland, said to appear only once every 7 years. The Basques tell of Atarabi, a golden land submerged, when its people angered the gods. In Japan, there is the legend of Mualos-Pacific civilization rich in temples and wisdom. And in the Americas, the stories of and the white cities of the jungle echo the same song. Atlantis is not lost, it is simply traveling. Like a dream, it slips into the minds that need it most. To those who feel the world is out of balance, Atlantis appears. To those who yearn for harmony, it sings. To those who fear we've forgotten something precious, it whispers. The island moves, not through oceans, but through longing. Perhaps that is why it has endured when so many other stories have crumbled. There is a moment in every journey when sound dissolves, when even the waves seem to hold their breath. It is here, dreamer, that we arrive in the hush beyond memory, in the still water where time forgets to move. This is the silence of the sea. You've drifted far now, through temples and kings, floods and flames, whispers and stars, and yet the sea has been with you all along, beneath every word, behind every image. It cradles the ruins of Atlantis like a mother holding her sleeping child, gently, eternally. Let your breath become that silence. Let the hush of the deep carry you inward. For beneath the stories, beneath the geometry, the empire, the echoes, what remains is water, the ancient sea. In Plato's tale, Atlantis was devoured by the sea in a single day and night. But there is something tender in that image, not of violence, but of return. As though the ocean, seeing that the island had forgotten its soul, pulled it back into its arms. What is the sea, if not memory made fluid? It remembers not in lines or numbers, but in motion, in rhythm, in depth. And Atlantis, in her final hour, gave herself back to that rhythm. There are places where the sea still sings her name, not aloud, but in the way a current curves, in the way sea glass holds a certain glint of something lost, in the murmuring hush that follows a wave as it recedes. If you've ever stood at the edge of a tide and felt your feet sink into wet sand, you felt it. The pull of something old, the breath of something forgotten. The silence of the sea is not empty. It is full of waiting, full of stories too vast to be spoken aloud, full of lives that rose and fell, cities that gleamed and then crumbled, prayers that floated upward like bubbles and were answered only by the slow shift of light through salt. The sea does not answer in words, it answers in presence. And so tonight, it offers you silence, not as punishment, but as invitation. Listen. Beneath the surface, coral blooms in cathedrals of blue. Fish drift like living jewels. Beneath them lie stones that once were doors, steps that once led to sacred places. Perhaps beneath it all, the bones of a city still sleep. Atlantis, folded into the sea's great song. But it is not a requiem, it is a lullaby. The silence of the sea does not mourn Atlantis, it rocks her gently. As it rocks you now, so let your breath fall into rhythm with the tide. Let your thoughts settle like silt. Let your soul float not upward, but inward. You are not separate from the sea. You are a vessel of its memory. Its silence holds you. Its stillness carries you. Even when forgotten, memory does not fade, it waits. Patient as stone, quiet as shadow, enduring as tide. It lingers beneath the surface of consciousness, beneath history's dust and time's careless hand. And in this chapter, dear dreamer, we turn not to find Atlantis, but to understand why we keep remembering her, why we always return, why, after millennia, the name still lingers like a note struck in an ancient hall, ringing softly through the silence. Let us walk now through the corridors of forgetting, hand in hand with memory itself. Atlantis was not preserved in libraries. No ruins remain to study. No scrolls, beyond the dialogues of Plato, bear its name. And yet, she is more real to us than some kingdoms carved into stone. She is remembered not in certainty, but in yearning. We remember not because we know, but because we long. And in that longing, the memory waits. It waits in the questions we ask, in the stories we tell children at night, in the dreams that carry us to impossible shores. Plato's story, whether crafted in metaphor or woven from ancient sources, was not built to satisfy curiosity, was a seed, planted in the fertile soil of the human imagination, watered by wonder, lit by the fire of mystery. And like all sacred seeds, it grew. Generations after Plato, scholars debated whether he meant it literally. Explorers set sail, maps were drawn with phantom islands. Writers and poets added their own touches, crystal domes, golden spires, eternal fountains. Atlantis evolved, not because she changed, but because we did. In the Renaissance, she became the dream of hidden knowledge. In the Enlightenment, she stood for lost reason. In the modern world, she became a mirror way to reflect on what we build and what we destroy. The memory waits. It calls softly through waves and myths. It whispers to those who listen not with ears, but with openness. It does not demand belief. It invites wonder. That is the essence of Atlantis. She does not ask to be found. She asks to be remembered, to be contemplated, to be felt in the marrow, not the mind. For memory is not always a record. Sometimes it is a presence, a warmth in the chest when hearing an old story, a hush in the air when standing near ruins, a flicker of something just out of reach. That is Atlantis. She is the memory that waits in the hush between dreams. Not every fall comes with thunder. Not every ending is born in flame. Some empires fade not with cries of war or cracks of stone, but with a quiet shifting of spirit. The loss is not of land, but of alignment, a drifting, subtle, unnoticed at first, until the center cannot hold. And so it was with Atlantis. Let us not imagine her last night as chaos, but as silence, as breath held too long, as the sigh of a soul forgetting itself. Plato tells us that the Atlanteans once lived in balance with nature, with law, with the divine. Their cities sang in harmony, their temples echoed with truth. But over time, that balance shifted, not all at once, slowly like the tilt of a star, barely visible, yet unstoppable. They no longer honored the old rites. The 10 kings met less often. Their oaths, once sacred, became ceremonial. Their chariots gleamed brighter than their wisdom. Their ships grew faster, but their hearts slowed. Greed crept in like shadow at dusk. It was not shouted, it whispered. The Atlanteans expanded not to share, but to possess. Their temples, once designed to reflect the heavens, began to reflect themselves. Mirrors replaced mosaics. Gold replaced silence. Stillness gave way to spectacle. The divine within them faint but steady dimmed. And then, the gods turned their gaze, not in wrath, but in sorrow. The earth, remembering its own song, shifted. The sea, once cradle, became veil. And the city sank not just beneath waves, but beneath memory. No fire scorched the sky. No screams echoed. Just a gentle unraveling. Like a dream that dissolves upon waking. A fall without fire. There is a sadness in this. Yes, but also peace. For Atlantis did not explode. She returned to the deep from which she came, returned to the silence from which all sacred things are born. Tonight, dear dreamer, we hold this truth gently in our hands. Not all endings must be violent. Some are woven into the breath of the world, the turn of the tide, the pause between one age and the next. Some falls are quiet, some losses are kind. And in that quiet, we find not despair but reflection. Perhaps Atlantis was not punished. Perhaps she was released. Let that thought settle like silt in your heart. Let it rest. We have traveled far, dear dreamer, across waves and whispers, through temples and tremors, from golden spires to silent sea. And yet our journey brings us here not to a conclusion, but to a threshold. For Atlantis was never meant to end. She is a dream that does not end. Close your eyes again. If they are flooded open, let the quiet of the deep cradle you, as though you float on something more delicate than water, an idea, a memory, a breath. Atlantis has always been this. A dream we share across generations, a collective murmur passed from mind to mind, from heart to heart, carried not by proof, but by resonance. She does not fade because we refuse to forget, and not because we seek her beneath oceans or within ruins, but because we feel her. In architecture that echoes her grace, in art that hums with longing, in silence that feels ancient. Atlantis is the perfect moment before the fall. She is the light before dusk, the pause before music, the breath before prayer. And that moment repeats, not in time, but in spirit. In every culture, there are echoes of her. In every myth, a shimmer of her shape. In every yearning for something more, something higher, gentler, wiser, she lives. Perhaps this is her greatest gift, not the memory of what was, but the invitation to imagine what could be. What if we lived in harmony again? What if our cities were tuned to the stars? What if our laws were written in reverence? What if our knowledge led not to dominance, but to understanding? This is the dream. Atlantis plants within us not to rebuild her in stone, but to remember what she once meant. In this way, she does not belong to the past. She is a light upon the horizon, a city of the soul, a vision always slightly out of reach, and yet always within us. So let yourself drift now, not away from her, but into her. You carry Atlantis in your questions, in the way your heart quiets when you hear the sea. The dream does not end here. It continues in every listener, every seeker, every stargazer who asks, what lies beyond what we know? And now, dear dreamer, we arrive not at the end, but at the return. You have drifted through shadows and shimmer, through echoes of temples and forgotten tides. You have stood beside the sons of Poseidon, walked beneath the geometry of stars, and breathed in the silence where a city once stood. You did not come to find Atlantis. You came to fill her, and now you know. She was never just a place. She was always a reflection, a rhythm, a soul-shaped memory. The city you sought beneath the sea has always lived within you. She is the hush in your breath when the world finally sleeps. She is the golden ring of stillness that encircles your thoughts. She is the vision that calls you back not to a world that was, but to a world that might still be. If only we remembered. Atlantis is not lost. She is waiting, in the songs we have yet to sing, in the temples we carry in silence, in the kindness we show when no one sees. So now, let your eyes close a little deeper. Let your thoughts turn slow and gentle. Let the waters cradle you one last time. And if the dream still lingers when you wake, let it follow you softly, like footprints on a silver shore. If these ancient whispers have stirred something in you, let your presence be felt with a gentle like, and join our quiet circle of dreamers by subscribing, that we may journey again through time's veiled halls, to where memory and mystery and tell us, gentle soul, from which corner of the world did you drift into this dream? Let the distant lights of this dreaming community flicker and glow, so that we may remember, together, the story is still waiting to be told. Until next time, may your sleep be deep, your thoughts wide as oceans, and your heart tuned to the song of the city beneath your soul. Good night, Atlantis. Remains